You shouldn't have listened.
We didn't call it a trip at first. Kyle kept saying, "We're just checking on the cabin," like it was a chore he'd been putting off and not a 10-day stretch on a frozen lake. He said his grandfather's place had been sitting empty since last winter. Storms had come through, and if anything went wrong out there, roof, pipes, dock, you didn't find out until it was too late. He made it sound responsible, like we were doing a favor for a dead man. The truth is, all of us were tired in the same ugly way. Not sleepy tired, the other kind. The kind where the days keep moving and you keep showing up and you start feeling like you're watching your own life from a few feet behind your head. That's what it felt like for me. Like I was present on paper, but not inside my own skin. December had been grinding everyone down. Kyle had money stress. Jess had been pulling overtime and pretending it wasn't cracking her. Mark had that flat, quiet depression that makes you feel guilty for laughing around him. Aaron was Aaron, always ready for beer, cold air, some kind of plan that sounded like freedom. Kyle's cabin was on an island in a public lake. When you say island, people picture palm trees and privacy. This was not that. It was a chunk of wooded land with a dock and a cabin and enough clearing to stack firewood. In summer, the lake was busy. In winter, it turned into a blank slate, and the quiet got so wide it made your ears search for something to hold on to. Kyle had a local guy who did deliveries and pickups for the handful of people who still owned properties out there. Kyle said we'd get dropped off and picked up on day 10. 10 days sounded dramatic when he said it out loud, so he laughed after like it was a joke. "It's just long enough to unwind," he said. "We'll come back like people again." We packed like amateurs pretending to be prepared. Coolers, bags of food, propane canisters, lanterns, sleeping bags rated for cold. Jess insisted on a first aid kit and made a big show of checking it because that's how she handled anxiety. Kyle brought fishing gear, a rifle case, and a hatchet he treated like a security blanket. Mark brought whiskey. Aaron brought more whiskey. I brought a notebook like I was going to write something meaningful out there, which is embarrassing now. We drove up early while the sky was still gray and undecided. The shoreline parking area was empty except for the transport guy's truck and the boat trailer. The lake looked like steel. Flat, hard, and quiet. Even the wind felt like it was waiting for permission. The man doing the drop-off was bundled in a heavy coat, face roughened by cold and years. He moved like he'd done this enough times to stop caring who you were. He didn't introduce himself. He just looked over our gear and said, "You staying out there long?" Kyle nodded. 10 days. The man's eyes stayed on Kyle a beat too long. "Weather's got teeth this year." Kyle shrugged like it didn't matter. "We'll be fine." The man didn't smile, he said, almost like he was repeating something he'd said to other people before. "Keep your fire steady." Then he pointed toward the lake. "Ice is starting to skin over. You fall in, it'll take the thought right out of your head." Aaron laughed like it was a joke, but the man didn't join him. He just started helping us load. The boat engine started with a rough, throaty sound. The air smelled like gas and frozen water. As we pushed off, the shoreline shrank fast, and the world behind us felt like it was being erased on purpose. Going out there felt like stepping away from everything that had been pressing on us. No phone buzz, no traffic, no people. The island sat ahead like a dark bruise on the lake's pale surface. At first, it looked smaller than I expected. Then we got closer and I realized it was bigger than the cabin made it seem. Trees packed tight, branches heavy with snow, a ring of forest around one small clearing where the cabin squatted like it had been left there and forgotten. The dock was old but intact. Snow covered the boards in uneven drifts. When the boat bumped it, the sound carried strangely far, like the lake wanted everyone to hear it. Kyle jumped out first, boots hitting the dock hard. "We're here," he announced, like we'd made it somewhere important. Jess stepped out carefully, eyes scanning the trees automatically. She always looked like she was counting exits, even when there weren't any. Mark stood still for a second after he stepped onto the dock, staring at the tree line like he recognized something he didn't want to recognize. "Feels closed in," he said. Aaron slapped him on the shoulder. "That's the point." I stepped off last and felt the dock flex under my weight. Not dangerous, just alive in that older wood way. The island smelled like cold bark and damp earth trapped under snow. The transport guy stayed near the boat, hands in his pockets, looking past us at the cabin. "You got everything?" he asked. Kyle nodded. "Yeah." The man hesitated. His gaze drifted to the woods and back. "You hear something you don't like," he said. "You don't go looking for it at night." Kyle smiled like he was trying to keep the moment light. "You think there are bears out here?" The man didn't smile back. "I'm saying it once," he replied. "You don't go looking." Then he climbed into the boat and started it up. Kyle called after him, "See you on the 10th." The transport guy lifted 2 fingers in a vague goodbye and pulled away. The boat disappeared into the gray distance fast, and the island became quiet enough to hear ourselves breathe. I remember standing there, watching him go, and feeling a flicker of something I didn't want to name. A small thought that didn't fit with the rest. He left fast. Kyle clapped his hands together. "All right," he said. "Gabbin'. Then we set up, then we fish, then we drink. Then we don't think about anything." We hauled gear up the short path to the clearing. Snow muffled our steps. The cabin came into full view. Dark wood, pitched roof, small windows with shutters. The door was plain with an old iron latch. Kyle dug out the key, big, old-fashioned, the kind you don't see anymore, and unlocked it. The door opened with a slow groan that made all of us pause. Not because it was scary, because it sounded like the cabin was clearing its throat. Inside smelled like old smoke, dust, damp wood. Cold lived in the corners. Our breath showed immediately. The cabin was simple. 1 main room, a small loft above, a pantry off to the side, a narrow back area with storage, and a tiny washroom. Kyle walked in like a person returning somewhere familiar. "Same as always," he said, but his voice didn't sound sure. Jess ran her gloved hand across the table. Dust coated it. "No one's been here in a while." Aaron wandered to the window and cracked a shutter open, letting in a pale strip of daylight. "Cozy," he said, in a murder way. Mark gave a weak laugh. It didn't reach his eyes. Near the door, taped crookedly to the wall, there was a sheet of paper. At first, I thought it was cabin rules. Don't leave food out, clean up, that kind of thing. Then I saw the spacing. Big gaps between lines, like whoever typed it expected you to read slowly. There was no title, no logo, no explanation. Just a list. Do not leave the marked paths after sunset. Do not respond to voices you cannot see. If you hear movement near the water at night, remain indoors. If you believe someone is outside, wait for daylight. Do not use light to search the tree line. Morning arrives unevenly. Aaron read the last line out loud and snorted. "That's cute." Kyle glanced at it, then away, like it made him uncomfortable in a way he didn't want to admit. Jess read it silently and said nothing. I took a photo of it anyway because some part of me didn't like how casually it was written, like someone had learned those rules by failing them. We settled into work the way groups do when nobody wants to admit they're unsettled. Busy hands, light chatter, tasks assigned without discussion. Kyle and Aaron hauled firewood, Jess unpacked and organized supplies like she was building a miniature hospital. Mark swept the floor to feel useful. I set lanterns around the room and checked fuel. Kyle got the fireplace going after a few stubborn tries. When the first real flames caught, the cabin warmed slowly, reluctant at first, then steady enough that our fingers stopped stinging. As the fire grew, the mood lifted. We ate something quick and stupid, sandwiches, jerky, whatever we could grab without cooking. Daylight faded early and Kyle insisted we go check the dock before it got too dark. "Just to make sure it'll hold," he said. "If the weather shifts, I don't want surprises." We walked down together. The lake had shifted from steel to ink. Snow fell in slow flakes that drifted like ash. Kyle checked the ropes and cleats. The dock was slick but stable. Aaron pointed out across the lake. "Looks like the world ends out there." Mark stood at the edge, staring down. "It's darker than it should be," he murmured. Jess looked at him. "What do you mean?" Mark shrugged. "Just look. It's like the water eats the light." We stood there listening. No animals, no distant cars, no other boats. Just faint ice cracking somewhere far off and the low sound of water moving under a forming skin. Kyle broke the moment. "Cabin, warm up, cards." Back inside, we settled into a rhythm. Fire, lanterns, food, laughter coming easier once the cold outside stopped feeling like a threat and started feeling like a barrier. Aaron told college stories. Kyle teased Mark about being too careful with the cards. Jess drank slowly, eyes a little too alert, but she smiled. I remember thinking, this is what we needed. Then the room went quiet without anyone deciding to make it quiet. It was small at first, like someone turned the volume down on the world. Kyle looked up from the cards. "You hear that?" Aaron frowned. "Hear what?" Kyle held up a hand. "Shh." We listened. Fire crackle. Lantern hiss. Mark's breathing. Outside, nothing. No wind, no lake sound. Even the little house noises, settling wood, shifting roof, felt like they stopped. Jess whispered, "It's just calm." Kyle's eyes were on the wall, not the windows. "Calm doesn't feel like this." Mark leaned forward, uneasy. "Like what?" Kyle didn't answer. Then a single, slow creak came from above us, from the loft. We all froze. Kyle stared upward. "No one's up there," he said, unnecessary. Another creak followed, like weight shifting across the boards. Aaron gave a nervous laugh. "Wood settling." Jess didn't laugh. Her eyes stayed on the ladder. Mark whispered, "It sounds like footsteps." Kyle stood up, slow, and picked up the hatchet. Jess grabbed his sleeve. "Don't," she said. Kyle looked at her. "It's my cabin." Jess kept her voice low. "It's late. You don't know what's up there. You don't go looking." That's when the transport guy's warning snapped back into my head. You hear something you don't like, you don't go looking for it at night. Kyle hesitated, jaw tight, pride and caution fighting each other in his face. The loft creaked again, then stopped. Silence returned, thick as wet wool. Kyle lowered the hatchet a little. "We're tired," he muttered. "We're hearing things." Aaron forced a smile. "Exactly. It's quiet. Quiet makes you weird." We tried to go back to cards. It didn't stick. Mark set his hand down on the table like he was steadying himself. I want to sleep, he said. Kyle exhaled. Yeah, fine. Sleeping arrangements happened like they always did on trips. Whoever claimed the loft first got it. Mark took it because he liked being away from noise. He carried his sleeping bag up, moving carefully, pausing at the top. What? Kyle called softly. Mark's voice drifted down. It's warmer up here. Kyle scoffed. Heat rises. Mark didn't answer right away. Then he said, quieter, it smells like lake water. Aaron frowned. What does that even mean? Mark's tone went flat, like he regretted speaking. Never mind. I'm tired. Jess set her sleeping spot near the fire. Kyle took the area closest to the door. Aaron threw his bag down near the table. I stayed near the far wall where a lantern sat within reach. We turned the lanterns down, but didn't turn them off. For a while, nothing happened. Then deep into the night, a sound came from the pantry. A faint click. Not loud, just a small metal shift like a latch moving. I sat up slowly. The pantry door was closed. It had been closed. I watched it. Lantern light was low, but enough to see. The pantry door moved inward a fraction, then back, like something tested it from the inside. My throat went dry. I glanced at Kyle. He was awake, eyes open, fixed on the same door. Kyle lifted a finger to his lips. Jess stirred, half asleep, then went still. She had that instinct. Aaron mumbled and rolled over. The pantry door shifted again, opened the width of a breath. Cold air slid out in a thin line. The fire crackled, then steadied. Kyle's hand tightened around the hatchet handle. Jess whispered, "Is it the wind?" Kyle shook his head once, small and firm. The pantry door eased shut again. The latch clicked. Silence. We held still a long time, the kind of stillness that makes your muscles ache. Then another sound started. Not from above, not from outside. From below the floorboards. A wet, faint drag, like a hand sliding across wood. It moved slowly under the cabin. Drag, pause, drag. Jess's head snapped toward me. She'd heard it too. Kyle whispered, "Everybody stay still." Aaron woke properly then. I felt it in the way his breathing changed. "What's happening?" he whispered. Kyle didn't answer. The wet drag moved beneath the pantry side, traveling toward the center of the room. It paused under the table, then continued, slow and deliberate, toward my side of the cabin. My skin went tight. I didn't move. I barely blinked. It stopped beneath my sleeping bag. The lantern beside me flickered slightly, flame wavering as if a small draft passed. Then, directly under me, there was a soft thump. Not loud, not like something hit, like something tapped once, gently. Jess made a small sound like she was going to cry. Kyle whispered, "Don't move." My body obeyed. The thump didn't repeat. The dragging sound didn't return. The cabin's ordinary noises crept back in one by one. Fire, lantern, the faint settling of old wood. Like the place was trying to pretend nothing happened. We didn't sleep again after that. Not real sleep. Not the kind you wake from, feeling rested. When the first light came, it didn't come evenly. It seeped in from the wrong side first, pale and gray, and the clearing outside brightened in patches. Shadows lifted in sections like someone was testing switches. Kyle sat up and said nothing. Jess hugged her knees to her chest. Aaron stared at the pantry as if it might open on its own. Mark called down from the loft, voice thick with fear and sleep. "Is everything okay?" Kyle forced his voice into something normal. "Yeah, go back to sleep." Mark didn't answer, but I heard him shift up there, like he didn't believe Kyle and didn't want to admit it. When full daylight finally arrived, Kyle stood and went straight to the pantry. Jess said, "Kyle," sharp. Kyle paused, then opened it anyway. Nothing flew out. Nothing moved. Just shelves and canned food and boxes. Ordinary. Jess exhaled like relief tried to happen. Then she saw the floor. There was a wet patch on the pantry boards, fresh and dark like a small spill. Only it wasn't near any containers. It wasn't under a shelf. It sat alone, just inside the door like someone had stood there, dripping. Kyle crouched and touched it with his finger, brought his finger up and sniffed. His face changed a little. "Lake," he said. Mark climbed down from the loft slowly, eyes red. "I told you," he whispered. "It smelled like that." I knelt near where I'd been sleeping. The boards were darker than the others, damp. A faint smear line ran across them like something wet had been dragged. Jess stared at it and didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, very quiet, "We stay together at night." Kyle nodded without looking at her. Aaron's voice came out small. "Yeah, fine." Kyle looked at the paper on the wall again, the typed rules, and his mouth tightened like he wanted to rip it down and couldn't. Outside, the clearing looked normal. The trees stood where they stood. Snow sat on branches. The lake shone dully. Near the cabin door, though, in the soft, damp edge where snow had melted, there was an indentation. Not footprints, not a trail, an oval depression, as if something had stood there a long time without shifting its weight. And when I looked up, really looked, the posts along the path felt closer than yesterday. Like the island had nudged them in overnight and expected us not to notice. That's when I understood something I didn't know how to say to the others yet. The island wasn't trying to scare us. It was taking measurements, and we'd just given it a full night of data. We spent the rest of the morning pretending the cabin was still just a cabin. Kyle boiled water for coffee like routine could overwrite what we'd seen. Jess wiped down the table and counters even though they were already clean. Aaron kept stepping outside and back in like checking the clearing would reassure him that the world still behaved. Mark sat on the edge of his sleeping bag and stared at his hands, turning them over as if he expected to find something new on them. No one said the word water again. Kyle suggested we check the roof and the dock, looking for a leak that could explain the dampness. He needed a mechanical reason. We all did. Outside, daylight made the island look harmless. Snow glittered. The lake moved slowly, dark but ordinary. The roof was intact. Snow piled along the edges, nothing broken or sagging. No ice dams, no obvious gaps. Kyle tapped along the boards with the butt of the hatchet, listening for hollow spots. Everything sounded solid. The boards were slick but stable. Ice had formed in thin, glassy sheets near the edges. Kyle broke a piece with his boot and watched it drift away. "See?" he said. "Nothing weird." Mark stared out across the lake, jaw tight. "It's still darker than it should be." Jess touched his arm. "Stop," she said gently. "You're making it worse." They didn't notice what I noticed then. Along the narrow path back up to the cabin, the wooden posts, those paired markers, were more obvious in daylight. Some were old, gray, and split. Others were new enough that the grain showed pale where they'd been cut. They were set just far enough apart to walk between them without brushing either side. I stepped between one pair and felt the same thing I'd felt the night before. Not fear, pressure. The sound of the forest flattened, like someone had pulled insulation over my ears. I stepped back out. The birds resumed. "Do you see those?" I asked. Kyle glanced over. "Markers? Grandpa put those in years ago." "For what?" Jess asked. Kyle hesitated. "Paths, I guess." "But there's no rope," Aaron said. "No signs." Kyle shrugged. "Old school." Mark stared at the posts, then at Kyle. "They don't feel like paths," he said. "They feel like lanes." Kyle didn't answer. We fished that afternoon near the dock. Ice cracked softly at the edges when we shifted our weight. The lake behaved itself in daylight. The cold was sharp but familiar. The world made sense again in small, manageable pieces. We caught a couple of small fish. Aaron celebrated too hard. Mark smiled for the first time since arriving. Jess laughed once, genuinely, and it felt like something loosened. For a few hours, the island let us believe it was done with us. That illusion didn't survive dusk. The moment we stepped back inside the cabin, the air felt wrong. Not colder, not heavier, just occupied. Like someone had returned while we were gone. Jess paused in the doorway. "Does it feel different?" Kyle wanted to dismiss it. I could see it on his face. Instead, he nodded once. "Yeah." We cooked dinner and ate without much talking. Mark kept glancing toward the pantry. Aaron tried to joke and failed. Kyle watched the ceiling more than his plate. As night settled, Kyle barred the door with a chair. It wouldn't stop anyone, but it made him feel better. Jess moved sleeping bags closer together. Mark insisted on the loft again, voice tight but stubborn. "I sleep better up there," he said. Kyle wanted to argue. Jess looked like she might force the issue. Mark's insistence cracked just enough that Jess let it go. We lay down early. The cabin stayed quiet longer than the night before. Long enough that hope crept back in. Long enough that muscles loosened. Then footsteps started above us. Not creaks, not settling. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. One step. Pause. Another. Mark whispered from the loft, his voice shaking. "Kyle?" Kyle sat up instantly. "What?" "Someone's walking up here." Kyle stood, hatchet in hand. "Mark, stay where you are." "I am," Mark said, breathing fast. "I swear, I am." The steps continued, circling the loft. Then they stopped directly above the ladder. Kyle took a step forward. Jess grabbed his wrist hard. "Don't." Kyle hissed. "That's Mark." Jess shook her head, eyes wet. "If you go up, you split. If you split, you lose someone." From above, Mark whispered, "Kyle, please." Kyle froze, torn between instinct and fear. The ladder creaked. Not from someone climbing down, from weight being placed on it. A hand appeared at the top rung. Wet. Water dripped from it onto the wood, darkening it. Mark screamed, raw and terrified. "That's not me!" Jess covered her mouth to muffle a sob. Aaron whispered, "No, no, no," over and over. Kyle raised the hatchet, shoulders shaking. The wet hand tightened. Then, slowly, it withdrew. The ladder stopped creaking. Silence slammed back into place. Mark sobbed above us, a broken sound. Kyle stayed frozen, hatchet raised, breathing like he'd been running. No one slept after that. Morning came wrong again. Light crept in unevenly, the clearing brightening in patches like the island was rationing it. Mark climbed down slowly, eyes red. Without a word, he rolled up his sleeve. 5 bruises marked his forearm, finger-shaped, deep, fresh. Jess reached out, then pulled her hand back. Kyle stared at them, jaw clenched. Aaron whispered, "Okay, that's real." Kyle sank into a chair like the weight finally hit him. "My grandfather kept journals," he said quietly. "He wrote a lot." Jess turned. "Where?" Kyle stood and went to a storage chest near the back. He opened it and pulled out a leather-bound book, edges worn, pages thick and yellowed. He set it on the table like it weighed too much. The early entries were boring. Weather, repairs, fishing notes. Kyle flipped forward. His fingers stopped on a page marked by a folded corner. He read silently, face tightening. Jess leaned in. "What does it say?" Kyle read out loud, voice rough. "First night, it tested the loft." No one spoke. He turned the page. "Water inside means it walked." Kyle's hands shook as he flipped again. "This page," he said, tapping it, "is dated day 2. Jess frowned. "So?" Kyle swallowed. "It's already written." We leaned in together. The ink on the day 2 page looked darker, fresher than the rest. A single sentence waited there. "Tomorrow, it will ask for a name." Beneath it, pressed faintly into the paper, was a damp fingerprint. 5 long fingers, still wet. That was when we understood night 1 wasn't a warning. It was a test. No one touched the journal after that. Kyle closed it and slid it back into the storage chest like it might do something if left open. Jess didn't argue. Mark kept his sleeve pulled down even though we'd all seen the bruises. Aaron sat at the table with his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he wasn't drinking. The cabin felt smaller on the second morning. Not physically, nothing had moved, but the space between things felt tighter, like the air had decided how much room we were allowed and cut the rest away. Kyle tried to take control the way he always did when things slipped. He made a plan. Plans made him feel useful. "We stick together," he said. "Daylight only, no wandering. We fish, we check supplies, we stay warm. Tonight, nobody sleeps alone." Mark nodded too quickly. Jess nodded once, slow and firm. Aaron said, "Yeah," like agreeing might make it true. I watched the windows while they talked. The clearing outside looked ordinary, but the edges of the trees felt closer than yesterday. Not closer in distance, closer in attention. We spent the day doing safe things on purpose. Fishing near the dock, chopping wood where we could all see each other, talking louder than we needed to. Every now and then, someone would stop mid-sentence like they'd heard something, then force themselves to keep going. Around midday, Jess noticed the path markers again. "They're closer," she said quietly. Kyle frowned. "They're not." She pointed. "They weren't that tight yesterday." Kyle walked over and stood between a pair, arms out slightly like he was measuring wingspan. "Same distance," he said. Jess shook her head. "It's not the distance, it's the feeling." Mark watched from the cabin doorway. "They feel like boundaries," he said, "not guides." Kyle's jaw tightened. "They're just posts." "Then why don't they go anywhere?" Aaron asked. "They don't lead to the dock. They don't lead to the cabin. They just cut the space." No one answered that. We found another paper that afternoon. It wasn't taped up or hidden. It was laid flat on the table inside the cabin, right where we'd been sitting earlier. None of us admitted to putting it there. Same font, same spacing. Night 2. Do not give a name. If asked, remain silent. If silence fails, leave the room. Doors are thinner than walls. Jess read it twice, then folded it carefully like it might cut her if she handled it wrong. Asked by who? Aaron said, trying to joke. The lake? Kyle didn't laugh. We don't talk tonight, he said. We sleep. We stay quiet. Mark swallowed. What if it already knows our names? Kyle didn't answer. As dusk fell, the island changed faster than it had the night before. Shadows gathered early. The lake darkened into that same light-eating black. The wind dropped completely like someone turned it off. Inside the cabin, the silence pressed in again. We ate without talking. The fire burned steady, but the heat didn't seem to travel far. The corners of the room stayed cold. Kyle moved the sleeping bags closer together, forming a tight cluster near the fire. Mark stayed off the loft without argument this time. No splitting, Jess said, more to herself than anyone else. Night settled. At first, nothing happened. Then, somewhere outside near the water, something moved. Not splashing, not footsteps. A slow displacement, like something heavy wading just deep enough to stay unseen. Jess's hand found mine without looking. Her grip was tight. We didn't look toward the windows. A voice came next. It wasn't loud. It wasn't distant. It sounded like it was standing just outside the cabin wall. Kyle, it said. The voice was wrong in a way that's hard to explain. It had Kyle's tone, his cadence, but it was missing the hesitation he always had before speaking. It was too smooth. Kyle went, rigid. Jess whispered, barely moving her lips. Don't. Kyle, the voice said again. Open the door. Aaron's breathing went shallow. Mark squeezed his eyes shut. The voice shifted. Jess. Her grip on my hand tightened painfully. Mark. Mark let out a broken sound like he might answer by accident. Do not give a name, Jess whispered, almost a chant. The voice paused, then it tried again, closer now. I know you're in there. The cabin creaked softly like it was adjusting its weight. The doorknob turned a fraction, and that was when Kyle stood up. Everybody into the back, he whispered. Now! We moved as one, slow and silent, retreating into the narrow storage area behind the main room. Kyle eased the door closed between us and the rest of the cabin. The voice stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then very softly from the other side of the door, someone spoke. Which one of you is afraid first? Jess covered her mouth to keep from answering. The door bowed inward slightly, wood flexing. Doors are thinner than walls, I remembered, and I understood too late that night 2 wasn't about entering. It was about choosing. We stayed in the back room long enough for our legs to start shaking. The voice didn't speak again right away. It let the silence do the work. The kind of silence that makes your thoughts turn on you, that starts offering compromises you don't remember agreeing to. Kyle crouched near the door, hatchet resting against his knee. Jess leaned against the wall, eyes closed, lips moving silently like she was counting. Aaron pressed his forehead to the shelves, breathing slow and shallow. Mark sat on the floor with his arms wrapped around himself, rocking slightly, trying not to make a sound. I watched the door. The wood bowed again, just a little, enough to prove it could. Then the voice returned, quieter this time, not mocking, almost gentle. I only need one of you. My stomach dropped. Jess's eyes snapped open, her face went white. One name, the voice said. That's all. You can choose. The handle twitched. The latch clicked softly, testing. Kyle whispered, barely audible. Don't. Nobody answers. The voice shifted tone again, adjusting like someone tuning a radio. "Kyle," it said, softer now. "Your grandfather used to talk to me all the time." Kyle flinched. "He told me who was brave," the voice continued. "He told me who stayed quiet." Mark made a small, involuntary sound. Jess hissed, "Stop listening." The door creaked as pressure increased against it. The hinges complained quietly. "I don't like guessing," the voice said. "Guessing leads to mistakes." The pressure eased. Footsteps moved away from the door, slow and deliberate. For a second, hope flared. Then the footsteps stopped on the other side of the wall, not near the door, near us. The wall pressed inward slightly, like someone leaned against it. The shelves rattled. A glass jar tipped and rolled before Kyle caught it. "You can leave the room," the voice said calmly. "Silence fails eventually." I felt Jess's grip tighten again. My heart hammered so hard it felt like it might give us away. Kyle whispered, "Nobody moves." The voice sighed. "I can wait," it said, "but the lake doesn't like waiting." Something scraped outside, low and wet. The sound traveled along the exterior wall, slow, exploratory. Then came a new sound, knocking. Not on the door, on the wall behind us. 3 soft taps. Mark whimpered. The taps came again, closer together. Jess squeezed her eyes shut so hard her face trembled. The wall flexed once more, and a thin line of dampness appeared along one seam in the boards, darkening the wood like a slow tear. Water. Kyle's face drained of color. "Leave the room," the voice repeated. "Doors are thinner than walls." That was when the light changed. The lantern in the main room flickered, casting shadows through the cracks around the door. Those shadows didn't move like firelight should. They slid sideways, stretching along the floor, pooling near the threshold. Aaron whispered, "It's coming in." Kyle made a decision. "Jess," he mouthed. She shook her head violently. Kyle pressed the hatchet into Aaron's hands. "If I don't come back," he whispered, "you keep them together." Jess grabbed Kyle's jacket, nails digging in. "Don't you dare!" Kyle leaned in close, forehead touching hers for a brief second. "I won't give a name," he whispered. "I'll just move it." Before anyone could stop him, he eased the back door open and slipped into the main room. The voice fell silent instantly. We waited. Seconds stretched into something elastic and painful. Then we heard Kyle's footsteps crossing the cabin, slow and deliberate. He was being careful not to run. "Hey," Kyle said, loud enough to carry. "I'm here." The voice answered immediately, closer than before. "I see you." Jess sobbed silently into her hands. Kyle's footsteps moved towards the front door. The chair scraped as he shifted it aside. "Open it," the voice said. Kyle didn't answer. The handle rattled. Then came a sound I will never forget. Water sloshing across the cabin floor. Not flooding, not rushing, walking. Kyle shouted, "Now!" Jess yanked the back door open and we spilled into the freezing night air, stumbling into the clearing as one tangled mass. The cold hit like a slap, stealing our breath. Behind us, inside the cabin, something slammed into the front door hard enough to shake the walls. Kyle burst out behind us, face pale, eyes wide. He slammed the back door shut and leaned against it, gasping. "What did it do?" Aaron whispered. Kyle shook his head. "It tried to make me say it," he said. "It kept asking who I was." A crack split through the ice on the lake, loud and sharp like a gunshot. We backed away from the cabin together, boots slipping on snow. The voice rose inside the walls, no longer pretending to be calm. "You broke the rule," it said, echoing through the wood. "You left the room." The windows fogged instantly from the inside, glass turning opaque. "And silence," the voice continued, now layered with something deeper, "has consequences." The cabin shuddered. Water began seeping from beneath the door, spreading across the snow in a dark, uneven line. Jess screamed. Kyle grabbed her arm. "Run!" We ran toward the path, toward the posts. The snow swallowed our footsteps. The forest loomed ahead, black and waiting. As we crossed between the first pair of markers, the world shifted. The forest went silent. Behind us, the cabin lights went out all at once. The voice followed us into the trees, no longer coming from any one place. "I don't need names anymore," it said. "I can recognize fear." We didn't stop running until our lungs burned and the clearing was gone. Somewhere behind us, deep in the trees, something adjusted its path. Night. 2 didn't end when the sun came up. It ended when we realized the island no longer needed the cabin, and that whatever we'd avoided by staying silent had only been postponed. The rules had changed, and they were changing for us.